anybody has the audacity of calling Kenya a free country, I think from the experiences we've had today and what other Kenyans have experienced, that matter should no longer be in doubt, that we have become a police state, we have become a rogue state, where, the constitutional rights do not matter anymore. It depends on the whims and the decisions of the executive, however unlawful or unconstitutional they are. And a country in which a citizen cannot leave or re-enter, because one of the questions we're asking ourselves is that if at all we leave, are we going to be able to come back? And if we come back, are we going to be able to remain here? Because in the with the Kenyan government now, you never know. They could say you belong to another country, or probably for my sake, they could say Sudan or some other place. So this matter should no longer be in doubt, that we are living in times that I didn't even experience during President Moi's rule.
Siaya Senator James Orengo, just before departing for Harare, Zimbabwe earlier this afternoon. Paul, Aol and Manuel Jose are still with me on the big story tonight. Paul, so what should happen now with the judiciary? How do they handle themselves in this situation? And rightfully so, the courts should be the place we go to arbitrate over issues that are in dispute. But now it seems like they're also getting sucked into the politics of it all. How should the judiciary conduct itself at this time?
If you look, Yvonne, if you look at the Constitution is very clear. And first of all, there is no doubt that it has created clear-cut functions of the judiciary, clear-cut functions of the executive, and clear-cut functions of the legislature. And the whole work of court is, one, to interpret the law, and two, anybody who feels aggrieved or anybody who wants any law aggrieved should actually have a right to go to court. What we actually have is, I really don't think that we have a judiciary that has actually collapsed. I think the executive has managed to collapse parliament more than they've collapsed the judiciary. What we simply have is that we have a judiciary that is issuing orders that the executive decide whether to respect, or even if they decide to respect, they respect them at their own time. Like, for example, before we go for the break, I was saying that you had asked about the issue that the Orengo team had not actually served the orders. I can actually tell you that even orders that have been served on the executive, they decide that, yeah, this one we will implement immediately, or this one we will not implement immediately. Like, for example, we saw during the whole fiasco of Miguna being dragged from court, the court was very clear that produce this person, bring it to us. It was served. They took, I don't know, 2 or more 3 days to produce it. You also saw the issue of where some TV stations were switched. They went to court. The courts were very clear that the government had violated the rights of these TV stations. The government was served. They also still decided that, yes, we will switch on this one, but this one will have to wait. At their own convenience is when they decided to open those TV stations. So I really don't think that the biggest problem we have is with the judiciary.
Okay, but because, yes. Paul, but because a lot of these issues are happening within the courts of law, some say the Chief Justice should do more to exert the authority of the judges. But in reality, what more can he do? What more can the courts do beyond? Because they don't enforce court orders. That's left to the police who fall under the, interior and who are under the National Police Service. But is there anything more realistically that the court can do? Or, do they just sit by and see all these court orders being violated?
Even if you look at the work of the judiciary, first of all, the Constitution says that different arms of government work on the basis of consultation and cooperation. Like, for example, judiciary relies on Parliament or the legislature, first of all, to make the laws. Then now it is the work of the judiciaries to interpret those laws, or to actually, if somebody feels aggrieved with that law, to either actually say that if we read the letter of the law, we think you are right or we think you are wrong. Then judiciary now relies on the executive arm, when it now comes to enforcement. For example, if for example that I'm taken to court, I'm guilty, I've been sentenced to 5 years, what the judiciary simply does is to hand me over to the executive because the prison department is under the executive. But now we have a situation where the key person who is supposed, because like I said, they are supposed to work on the basis of consultation and cooperation. The person whom you are supposed to hand over to either decides that he will not agree with what you are saying, or he will do it at his own time. So I really don't think that there is more that the judiciary can. Because you see, without the arm of the executive, then it means that all those orders coming from the courts are actually meaningless. And you see, the moment that people or citizens realize that even if an order comes from the court, it is not serious, or the executive will not abide to it, then technically people will decide that we will sort out our disagreements through whichever other means, but we will not go to the courts.
Okay, and that's a good point to then bring in Manuel to talk about what are the implications of that. If you agree with what Paul is saying, you know, that the courts have done what they can do. I mean, the courts do not have authority over the National Police Service to enforce some of these things. What is the bigger implication of what we're seeing happening? And by the way, this has been happening not just this year, but I mean, for a better part of last year as well.
First of all, Yvonne, we must appreciate the fact that we foresaw this situation before we promulgated the new constitution. And that is why we had these structures put forth in the constitution. Now, the parliament in the recent past has enacted an act called Contempt Act. This act, in essence, was supposed to punish individuals who go against, or are in contempt of court. Now, we have seen courts issue orders up and down, and these people in offices, state offices, refuse to comply with these orders. Now, the situation we are in, we are in is critical on the basis that that oversight, which role of the courts, is being undermined by the executive. Now, what needs to be done is very simple. Now, when we get to this situation, the executive will keep on refusing to comply with these orders. But the judiciary should not stop discharging its duties. Remember, such orders, once they're issued, they're supposed to be enforced by the police. The police has that responsibility of enforcing these orders. Now, since the police, there is that manipulation from the executive, also refused to enforce such orders, we find out the judiciary finding itself in a critical situation where orders are not complied with. But
could we get, Manuel, to a point where you remember what we used to say about a title deed, that it really is just a piece of paper?
Yes.
And that you having a title deed saying, I own piece of land X, Y, Z, doesn't mean anything, because clearly, I mean, are we getting to that point where...
Yes, we are in a situation which I may term in law constitution without constitutionalism, in that we have a very legitimate document which is elaborate in terms of what is supposed to be done and how the rule of law is supposed to be applied, but one arm of government is refusing to comply, or other arms of government are refusing to comply with these directives, or rather the rule of law. So there is a need to ensure that, or we need to have a conversation as to whether we can be able to run a country where the executive is hell-bent in violating, certain constitutional requirements. So the situation of not complying with the constitutionalism that, the spirit and the intent of the Constitution not being followed can only be mitigated by all of us having a conversation. And we have a duty, because we are in a constitutional democracy, where the people can stand out and speak out when situations of this kind arise.
All right. Speaking about the people for a moment, and you're both officers of the law, so you can advise me. Can I... if there's a court order that has been issued against me for whatever action, Paul, can I go to court and say, I will not obey this court order because precedence has been set? Like, can I just decide to ignore it, but, present a strong case in court? Is that what this means? Can I now just say, I mean, if the executive and if individuals who are high-ranking can decide to ignore court orders? I don't know. I'm just wondering what that means.
Yvonne, you don't follow a bad example because somebody else is following a bad example.
Yeah, I mean, what are the implications of that? Can I then decide not to?
Yes, what is simply happening is that the government is pushing Kenyans to such an extent where Kenyans will also decide that we also want to live our own way. We are not guided. Like Kenyans can also decide that if the government can disrespect the judiciary, I'm also within my rights to disrespect the judiciary. But yes, I really don't think that we really need to go down that road, because I can tell you, the moment we lose the judiciary, then it technically means that you are right to claim that I have this right or I own this by right. It's no longer there. Because
and the reason I'm asking this, Paul, is because even when you heard Senator Moses Kajwang speaking, and when Sophia asked him about, perhaps that NASA is also guilty of, not following court orders, and I wrote it down because he said the government has a great responsibility. He used a comparative there to adhere to the rule of law more than any other.
First of all, I don't think so that NASA has actually violated a court order, because what we are actually explaining, what actually those people went to that course in Kitui and what the court stopped was henceforth a discussion within the county assemblies of passing this thing we are calling the People Assembly Bill and all that. And I don't think that there's any county assembly that has progressed when that matter is still in court, as much as the issues that were there were suspect. Because, for example, there's issues before court where court has actually determined that you cannot go to court and expect the court to stop what you think will happen. That you come to court when you are aggrieved, when it has already happened, and then you say, like, for example, I remember there was a time before actually the general elections where NASA, or it was called then, went to court and said that if the legislature is allowed to proceed with this debate, they will pass some bills or some provisions that will be inconsistent with the Constitution. And I remember Justice Odinga ruled and said, you cannot stop Parliament from doing its work. Let them first pass them. Once they've passed them, then come back to court and tell us, we are aggrieved with this and this and this and this. It's the same thing that where like, for example, you saw like when the government decided to switch off some TV stations, saying that we suspected that this particular TV station and this one were going to broadcast live this event. You can't actually do that. What you simply wait is that you first wait. Once they've broadcasted, then if you feel that they've aggrieved or they've violated any provision, then now you go to court and do it. Yes, then you go to court and then you say. That's
understood, gentlemen. I want to bring in another aspect, and this is what Manwa said a little bit earlier in terms of the Contempt Act. And I'd like you to explain this to me, gentlemen. Willis Otieno, who's the lawyer for both James Orengo and Jimi Wanjigi, says they shall stop fighting the state in court. They're saying that government officers will now have to appear in court in person to answer in their personal capacity, for their actions. Past experiences of government officers appearing in court have not been very promising, but listen to Willis Otieno.
Once a court has given an order, all those officers who disobey that court order, they will bear personal responsibility for all that they've done in disobedience of the court order and in further infringement of the rights of my clients. And in this case, we will actually be considering going for the individuals in their own individual names, not going for the state as an amorphous entity. So that we want public officers who try to hide behind officialdom to abrogate the Constitution, to disobey court orders. They must now start taking personal liability for all those actions. And that, in our view, is what we are considering as a legal team that we are going to take up against the officers at the Immigration Department and even the officers at the airport who are part and parcel of this abrogation of rights of our clients.
Manuel, can this really be done?
I think I agree with the Willis. You know, the essence of the Contempt Act was to bring, was to ensure that these state officers comply with the orders that are coming from the court. Now, these orders are, the contempt of court, if you're in contempt of court, it's criminal in nature, so that you cannot actually implicate the entire state. You, as a person who has been put in a position of leadership, running a ministry, if you fail to comply with orders that are coming from an institution like the court, then you are responsible solely as an individual to the punishments laid down under the Act. And so I think that would be able to ensure that these ministries or the people running these state offices comply with court orders. Because essentially, it has been the routine, and it is right now our law that if you refuse to comply with court orders, then you are individually liable to contempt of court. Now, the effect of that is that, or the consequence of that is that you'll be subjected to civil jail, or you'll be actually arrested and also go through the punishment process just like a criminal can do. So I think that is one way that we can be able to mitigate, or rather eradicate the tendency that is coming up, whereby state officers are hiding under the umbrella of the government to refuse to comply with court orders. And we know very well that, sometimes these state officers believe that once they are protected by the executive branch of government, nobody, or rather there's no court order that can be able to be, imposed upon them. And so the essence of that directive, and we have seen actually contempt proceedings and even arrest warrants being issued by the courts to certain government officers, especially when they have refused to comply with court orders. I think that should be the way to go. And our constitution provides for a very elaborate, national values under Article 10, whereby one of the values that should be considered for a person to hold office is that he must be a person of integrity. Mm-hmm. You cannot be a person of integrity if you violate court orders. And if you are in contempt of court, then typically you are a criminal. And if such, there is a matter in court, and we should actually strengthen our judicial system by bringing these people into book, especially when there is a situation where a CS or anybody in an institution of government has refused to comply with a court order. We need to actually ensure that we have them accountable and even start proceedings of removal of office, because one of the reasons why they are in that office and they took oath of office to ensure that they uphold the rule of law.
Okay, and upholding the rule of law. Paul, I want to give you the final word now, because Manuel says we have a constitution but no constitutionalism. There's a lot of legal speak that is going on in the country, but what some would see to be very easy, court orders, the rule of law, this is what the court has said, now just seem to be a matter of debate. So, Paul, how do we remedy this situation as we close?
To remedy the situation is very simple, Yvonne. We just need to have an executive arm that, one, agrees to follow the law in its actions and deliberations. For you to apply even to get a passport, there's a process through which you apply and there's a process through which you are given that passport. It's the same thing that if you want to run a TV station, there's a process through which you apply, there's a process through which you are given a license. And I can tell you, there's a process through which your license can be taken, your TV station can be switched off, or there's a process through which your passport can be. What we need is a very simple rule. We just need a government that is keen of, first of all, saying that, yes, I have other partners. As much as I am the executive, I have another partner called the judiciary, also have another partner called parliament, and yes, I will do my bit. I will expect judiciary to do the bit, and also expect the executive, I'll also expect the legislature to do the bit. And actually, if you look at the word in the Constitution, the word in the Constitution is very simple, that one, as much as all these bodies are independent, they work in consultation and in cooperation with each other. And yes, there is a process through which, if one agency or if one arm disagrees with the arm, there are processes through which you can sort out the disagreement. Like, for example, anybody who is dissatisfied with any ruling, first of all, they appeal. Yeah. That is not denied. There's a procedure through which you can appeal. Even if you want it to be brought as a matter of urgency, all those things can be met. So what we need is to have a government that says that as much as I disagree, but I will still follow the law in my disagreement. Okay, thank you very much, Paul Owl and Manuel Hosea. Gentlemen, I thank you for the conversation tonight. Do we have a constitution with no constitutionalism? Is the law really clear anymore, as we were quite enthusiastically quoting last year during the Supreme Court petitions? I'll leave that to you to decide. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole on The Big Story tonight. Up next is KTN Prime with Ben Kitili. Good night.